Okay, good evening, good morning, good anything, wherever you are watching this from. I'm so excited today to talk to you about one of my favorite books that just came out this year. And I have the authors here with me today that I have a lot of questions for them about this book. So I'm so excited to introduce Dr. Alaa Abu Arab and Dr. Erica Herrera. Welcome.
Hey.
Hey, okay, so I want to thank you. First, I want to start by thanking you both for writing this amazing book that I can't wait to dig in and ask you all these questions. And the book, if in case you missed it, it's The Occupational Identity, and it's a long title, but I'm going to go with it: Journeys of Minoritized Occupational Therapists Across Race, Religion, and Culture. So thank you both so much for writing this book. As you can see, I'm a highlighter girl with pencils, and I have all these notes and highlights because it has such good places that I feel like, we needed this book. We really, it's overdue. So, and before we dig in, I just really want to introduce you to these two amazing occupational therapists. Everything, your advocates, your leaders, you're so many things. So, I'm going to start with Alaa. Dr. Alaa Abu Arab is a husband, a father, an author, a labor leader, a co-founder of the No Bias LLC, and a longtime activist rooted in anti-war and anti-oppression. He received his doctoral degree from Temple University, and his research centered on the exploration of racial bias among occupational therapy professionals. He is the author of the chapter Trauma-Informed Care, Historical and Modern Implication of Racism and Engagement in Meaningful Activities in the textbook by AOTA Press entitled Trauma, Occupational Participation Foundations and Population Considerations in Occupational Therapy. We love long titles in this profession.
Thank you. Yeah,
Alaa is currently practicing in acute care in Los Angeles, California. So welcome, Alaa.
Thank you.
Next, I have another brilliant OT, Dr. Erica Herrera. She is an occupational therapist and certified hand therapist. She completed her undergrad degree at the California State Polytechnic University of Pomona in biological sciences and her master's degree from Loma Linda University and her doctorate degree at the Rocky Mountain of Health Promotions. She has a passion for community service statewide, as well as a missionary work abroad. Her community service include so many things, honestly, but I shortened the list down. She worked with orphans in Haiti to make adaptive equipment and upper extremity orthotics for children, as well as orphans in Morocco. She worked with, in Morocco, she worked with Arab and Italian therapists on proper positioning for children with musculoskeletal disorders, to name a few things of her accomplishments. Currently, she is a clinical professor and she lives in Loma Linda, California. Welcome, both of you. This is such good work, and I'm so excited and thankful again for you for writing this book. And your book, this amazing book, you both talk about the stories of occupational therapy students and practitioners and how their intersectionality and cultural identities led them to the path where they are on right now in OT. And I have to say, it does a beautiful job of showing that everything starts and is really connected to who we are and our identities. And where this is where the best things happen for us as OTs. It's the things that come from our identities. Yet they also, in your book, you highlight throughout the book the challenges and the struggles that these storytellers share, the brave moments that they share, successes, disappointments, and a mix of other feelings throughout these stories. And you highlight a lot of identities across the book. There's so many beautiful identities. And before we go on, I really want to say, it's like there is another beautiful book written by another brilliant OT, and I want to give a shout out to Occupational Therapy Disruptors by Sheila Evlev. She is absolutely one of my absolute favorite people in OT for her core values, highlighting and supporting marginalized communities. So Sheila, if you're listening, thank you so much for writing another brilliant book that I hope I get to talk to you about hopefully soon. But going back to your masterpiece, and I have to say, Alaa and Erica, when I started reading this book, I was really smiling just looking at the table of content. And I don't know if I was smiling and filled with joy just because I know that you two have written it and it's going to be good, or because we need it and it's overdue, or because of the smart, sassy titles that you picked, or all of the above. But I honestly think that the anticipation of having such a good book that speaks to those marginalized is about time that we listen to. And also I love the non-apologetic tone of the book, and the ungroomed perspectives on diversity. And I think what I'm trying to say again is thank you for giving voices for people to tell their stories, and highlighting the concept of identity, because we don't talk about that much, and you two did, and you gave voice to people. So I'm going to start by asking, the story of how this book was born. And I want to say, and I read the book. I don't know how you two met, but I want others to know also, hear the story from you. How did you two meet and decide to actually write this book? How did it all start?
Well, so I guess I can chime in on how we met. It's kind of like we met and didn't meet at the same time. So we both were chosen to be a part of a committee for DEI, for OTAC, right? So OTAC had this push. A lot of things were happening, I think, just in our nation, period. And so they felt like they needed a platform for DEI. And in order to be a part of the committee, there was you had to apply and do all these different things. And so we just happened to end up being a part of this committee. And then from there, because the committee was so large, and of course you can't take DEI and make it this small thing, like it's a huge, that's 3 letters, but it's saying a lot. Like, what does that even mean? So the committee ended up having to make us into subgroups to focus on different areas of occupational therapy. And from there, Alaa and I were on the same subcommittee. And so we were having the same kinds of conversations. I can't remember if our meetings were once a month or something like that, but we were having these same kinds of conversations and doing the same kinds of research and trying to, see what we can do to help our profession. With that said, though, we both felt it almost became like a spinoff, because we started to, just from hearing each other speak sometimes in some of the group meetings and stuff, we kind of started realizing we were on the same page with certain things, but it wasn't necessarily happening in the committee. Because, when you're dealing with committees, there's a lot of bureaucracy. You can't just come out and say what you want to say and post what you want to post. Things have to be done a certain way, and to be presented professionally, which is, we understand that. But Alaa and I, we were starting feeling like, what are we actually doing? The activists in Alaa and the person, me, huge community member, missionary work, like, what are we actually doing? Are we just putting words on paper? Are we just filling a checkbox? Like, what are we actually doing? And so, long story short, we ended up, like, I think I may have called him one day because he was having an event and I was trying to get some information, or I was like, oh, when are you going to be talking or whatever? And so we had this conversation, and then apparently he said, like, somewhere in the conversation, he was like, there was something you said in the committee. Mind you, this is probably like 8 months later, this phone call.
Mhm.
He was like, oh, there's something you said in the committee. I'm like, 8 months ago, that sparked an idea for me to do more. And so I was like, interesting, tell me more. And so this is when he started talking about, what are we doing for the OTs, and what we're facing, what's really the issue, and considering everything that's going on in our nation right now, like, is the committee enough? And he had these ideas. And so then I'm like, yeah, I was thinking the same kind of thing. And so I'm throwing out my ideas. And so from there, we just took off. And this was all over phone. And then the
Right.
committee before was Zoom. So we didn't actually meet in person until I think we had our first meeting, but we had already had either an interview done or some things written via Zoom. So we had already
Mhm.
worked together and still hadn't met physically
Yeah.
in person.
Yeah.
So probably like, I don't know, a year and a half, like
Mhm.
from committee to phone to Zoom call to email, text messaging, phone call, and then we met in person for the first time. But it almost felt like we are like there was so much time. It was like I feel like I already know you at this
Right.
point. Because this, mind you, this was COVID too. Like
Mhm.
it was,
Oh,
COVID time, and so yeah.
Yeah. It's honestly, it's amazing. And she's right. It was like we met in 2020, 2021, post George Floyd murder, COVID-19 hit. And so everything was virtual. And mind you, we both have young kids. And so, yeah, we didn't meet Erica actually until we had already had a publishing deal.
oh, wow.
We had done a probably close to half of the book before we
Oh, is that what?
met in person.
I don't.
Because it's all like convoluted, right?
It's
All dependent.
so
I mean,
yeah.
like in the Razan, we actually met every week, every Tuesday for the most part, from September 2021 until end of 2023, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yep.
I'm
it's
It's a
really
trip.
amazing journey.
I'm glad you didn't let go of the passion, because, but again, this speaks to the nature of good work. Like if it's there, it's there. Like,
Mhm.
it doesn't go away. So, I'm glad you both followed through, and you made it reality. So thank you.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so let's dig in with the book. And again, for those who are listening, please get the book and read it. It's so refreshing. And again, the honest and the raw stories from people who actually have these experiences. There's nothing like it. So I want to start by, the beginning of the book. And I'm gonna ask Alaa to take this one. Um, the COTAD, for those like you don't know COTAD, which is the Coalition for Occupational Therapy Advocates for Diversity, COTAD. They put the foreword for the book. They describe your hope for this book as a critical insight for radical inclusion. And, as the authors of the book, do you want to explain to us what your hope is for radical inclusion? What does that look like? What does radical inclusion look like for OT community?
Yeah, that's a really, I think, profound way to describe sort of my intention. Was to center the marginalized, right? Move them from the margins into the middle, make them the center of the story. And, part of that discomfort that me and Erica had in those subcommittees was, all the gatekeeping that was involved, right? All the individuals who, again, have to go through these hoops just to get our points across or just to try and implement a certain program or initiative. And, you know, you don't have to have a peer review or anything particularly published to believe someone's story. And with the history that we have had in this country, those histories are very they're very ugly, if we're being honest. And those traumas move from generation to generation. And radical inclusion to me would be centering those stories, and for those of us that have been historically in the middle, white Christian males, for example, really caring about someone you don't know.
Mm.
Uh, it's not really that radical when you think about it like that, right? Giving a crap about somebody that you don't know because of their humanity. And that's really where Erica came in with a lot of her insights about bringing things down to a human level. And seeing these individuals and their stories for their humanity, right? So that to me is what I guess radical inclusion means. That's really what the intention was.
Yeah. And that sounds, it makes perfect sense to me. Again, like, as someone I identify with a marginalized community of the Arab community, that makes sense to me. And it's like, it's not a brainer. It's, it's the way how we should, deal with each other as humans. But if it was that easy to implement, I guess we wouldn't need to write this book or talk about it.
That's right.
But that's a conversation for another time. But thank you for this, Alaa.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, hello.
I want to continue with Alaa also asking, as a follow-up, I'm sorry, my cats are destroying the room. Kotat also noted in their forward that communities need empathetic understanding of intersectionality. And I couldn't agree with more. Intersectionality, we throw this term a lot without really sometimes understanding the depth and the significance of it. You do need to understand the intersectionality of someone to understand where they're coming from. So I totally agree with them. But Ala, why do you think is talking so much? It's taking us so much effort for something so natural to understand that we're different people, we have different perspectives on things. Why is it so much work to talk about intersectionality? And it takes so much advocating to just tell people you gotta listen to the person, knowing where they're coming from, knowing who they are. Why is this happening, basically?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a loaded question, honestly. And we can look at it on a micro level and a macro level, if I want to like sort of break it down foundationally, like, we live in a very stereotypical type of world, right? The way we learn, the way we're exposed to certain things, what we're told by the media, what we're not told. When I do a lot of my workshops, I'll do like a circle of trust and sort of, you pick 5 people that are closest to you that are not your family, and then match demographics with your demographics. And oftentimes, 4 out of 5 are the same demographic, whether it be religion or sexuality or gender, right? We sort of kind of huddle with people that we might know because it's easier. And when we look at implementing stuff like this into our curriculums and into our, as a basic level of knowledge, right? This is sort of like what you're saying is these things are basic. People become uncomfortable, and that discomfort to them feels like oppression when we're actually all we're trying to do is express our oppression and make you understand it. And for whatever reason, based on it takes learning, it takes work to actually give crap about somebody you don't know. And it's lazy and easier, especially if you're from the privileged communities, right? Where me being uncomfortable, right? Like oftentimes I always identify as a white passing male, right? And so I have on a personal level a lot of privilege, especially in OT, where I can sort of quote unquote climb that ladder a lot faster than a lot of my women colleagues, and so if a person of the opposite gender of mine comes at me with concerns, right, my privilege shouldn't interrupt me from caring for those concerns. And I think that's where we're messed up at, and we're told by a lot of other people that are in power to not either not care, pretend it doesn't exist, right, or judge us how we respond to that oppression. And it's all those 3 things are unfair, and so yeah, I guess long answer short, that's kind of where I think our problem lies, specifically in our profession, where we're not okay with just letting things actually evolve. We want to keep things the way they are because we're lazy about it, if we're being honest, and the way we respond to that oppression within our profession is judged as quote unquote aggressive or, not tactical or not getting anything done. And that's unfortunate, how someone responds to their traumas, which highlights in this book a lot of trauma. People's responses are going to be different. And we shouldn't be, those of us in the privileged position should not be judging how people respond to their trauma.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I hopefully with this, with seeing this term again, popping up more in curricula and, conversations. Hopefully we're going to get somewhere. But as you said, we are lazy. We don't want to do the work. And we need to do better.
Yeah.
It's a really good question, honestly. Thank you.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. So for the rest of the questions I have, like I want to highlight some, I randomly highlighted some chapters. It's not, doesn't mean that other identities are more important than the other, because again, I wish I could like highlight each and every chapter because it's so good, but I also don't want to give it
Mhm.
so I want to leave something for people to read. So I kind of randomly picked on some of the chapters. I want to start with the chapter that Erica, you wrote. And on chapter 18, actually page 18, I forgot what the title of the chapter is, but you state that this book is much needed in the realm of DEI until the end of that sentence. How do you think will the profession look like if this actually happens? Talk to me about the big picture if the profession had that perspective on DEI. And I want to go back to page 18 because I kind of chopped it.
Yeah.
Guys, I want people to know what I'm talking about. You say this book is much needed in the realm of DEI and occupational therapy, and we hope that the stories will shift thinking and worldviews away from the whiteness and the dominant demographic. How would that look like?
So I think the best way, at least how my brain works, is to first say what it doesn't look like. And so to me, it doesn't look like, hey, let me give you a seat at the table so we can fit an initiative or a percentage in our department. Right? It's not, well, we have too much research on this topic matter, so let's throw in some more cultural topics so we look like we're meeting everyone's needs and diversifying. You know what I mean? Or one that I've noticed, maybe you have had it in your employment or other places, but forcing a cultural potluck, which actually backfires and makes you feel more disconnected from your peers than you were before the cultural potluck, right? So it's not a forcefulness. So to me, the big picture is purposeful, honest engagement with the ones that we're serving and interacting with, right? So to do that, like Alaa was saying a little bit about, some of the laziness and all of that, to do that, you have to be vulnerable. You have to be vulnerable. You have to acknowledge, one, that we don't know everything. You don't know everything about somebody else, because the realization is we don't even know everything about ourselves. We're still learning that. And so there's no way that I can know everything about somebody else. Right. But we do share hardships and triumphs in our entire story. So instead of, the big picture would be not just comparing those hardships and triumphs, so just for the sake of victimization and pity, right? But for healing and for growth and connection, right? Instead of, we want to listen and feel rather than just hear and categorize, which I think is what we do a lot. And so we're all extremely diverse, like even if you're Black female Muslim, or if you're white Christian male, or all these different things, there's way more strings to pull on those, where there's so many different things: our race, our economic status, location, where you grew up, your family origin, your intelligence level. I mean, there's so many different things, but we are all equal because we all have a past, a present, and a future, yet none of us asked to be here on earth. Yet we're all trying to get about this journey the best way we know how, so we can at least connect on some level there. So to me, that would be like the biggest picture. If we approach our practice and our teachings this way, then I feel the outcome will be natural. And you wouldn't have to meet a quote unquote DEI quota, because the love would be there.
Right.
We wouldn't have to categorize these things, because you would just be naturally trying to, fail and succeed. And, oh man, I said something inappropriate. Well, hopefully that person will be vulnerable enough to correct me. And then that's a learning thing that we just did, as opposed to, I'm never going to speak. I'm not going to say anything. I'll just let my company dictate my next assessment, or in school that teaching didn't work for me, but I'm not going to say anything because I need to be here. I want to graduate. Like we just passively do things, and then we let the rest of our hierarchy or what have you make us try to be cultural DEI. Like that's not when you naturally should just be doing that. We all should be doing that. So
Yeah. No, I agree. I always say it's like, no, success in DEI when we stop talking about DEI. If it's not if it's not a concern that we need to do something about DEI. I mean, like, but connecting what you said to Ala was talking about the intersectionality, and it takes effort, and to your point, it also takes that empathy and understanding intersectionality. It's not just like, oh, look at us, we're doing X, Y, and Z, but also, when no one's watching, what do you do? When no one's watching, what kind of questions do you do? How interested are you in knowing about someone else? But I guess we have a long, long way to go. Okay, Ala, I'm switching to one of the chapters that you wrote, and the book talk about some daring topics, and the things that we're lazy to talk about, or like we're not comfortable talking about. Examples is like white supremacy, colonization, apartheid, and other topics. In your chapter, the onus on justice, you talk about, and I hope I'm saying her name correct, Oshinta. You tell the story of, or Oshinta tells her story as a South Asian woman about microaggressions, and that there's nothing, and I love this part, there's nothing micro about microaggressions. It doesn't feel that way. And I love the part when you say on page 33 that if you walk into a closed door, it still hurts. So it's not it's like, oh, well, I love that line. And I'm gonna steal it.
That's okay.
It still hurts you. Yeah, it's like, I know you didn't mean it. It still hurts. So don't call it microaggression. There's no micro about it. It's correct. How do you handle the topics in your own professional lives as an OT? How do microaggression look like for an advocate like you? How do you handle that?
I speak about this a lot during my workshops. I really personalize a lot of, sort of what radicalized me in the first place. Right. And that's sort of what I've experienced. And my story is a piece of my story is also in the book, and sort of some of the things I've gotten in the workplace. And and I'll be honest, if I knew how to handle it properly, I would teach it better. Right. But I honestly, even to this day, with a name like Alaa, and again, most people can't say my name with the Ain, the letter in Arabic. It's Allah. And so you can just imagine, like, I've spoken to you about this at Azan, Erica, like just utter nonsense, right? On a daily basis, patients, coworkers, other parents of other kids at my kids' school, like it's consistent. And I've developed sort of a multi-pronged sort of like Swiss Army knife approach to it. And I can't expect others to be able to do that, to be honest with you. If crying helps you get through it, then cry. If getting hold of a good mental health therapist to talk you through on a weekly basis, then do that. If you want to spend time with your family or want to get out more, or whatever it is that's going to make you and your self-care deal with the day-to-day of the world, then do that. And be intentional about doing those things. Sometimes I respond with humor, depending on the situation. Sometimes I respond with a little bit of rage. Like I might just say, where are you from, actually? Like, and I might, so I'm not gonna tell you that any one of those responses is better than the other. Because because again, I'm not gonna judge someone's responses to what, as you call it, a microaggression, right? Which is trauma. And for a lot of us, especially, especially Black women and trans women, like they deal with it on such more of a larger level on a daily basis. And, if they respond the way they respond, I'm not going to be the one to judge it. And so I don't know what is best way to teach it. I do know that what you're feeling is real, and how you deal with that is on you. And I want to be available to people to help them deal with it, but by all means, I don't have a blueprint, you know?
Yeah. And that's what makes it real, right? Like everyone
Yeah.
deals with their own trauma, their own way, whatever works, you work. I love that line. And again, it's like a cut is a cut is a cut. Like, you
Yeah.
know, if something is insulting, it's insulting no matter.
Yeah.
And everyone deals with it a different way. But I'm hearing
Right.
saying it's like whatever works for you.
Yeah. And I hope, honestly, I
yeah.
hope, and me, and Erica, we'll talk about this throughout our writing. Maybe I'm answering. I think Erica has a point, and like that's why we wrote this book, so students can see this and be like, okay, hey, someone else has dealt with this before. Like I'm not alone, and I think that lonely feeling is what gets us in trouble. And go, Erica, you can go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just resonated with what you said right now, and something popped into my mind. It's okay to say I don't know,
Mhm.
you know, like, and I feel like that's some of the issue that we have is trying to give an answer, or trying to, like, when someone is in, that's even us as OTs, right? Someone's in pain. The best thing is not to just try to solve all the time, you know, all the time. It's like just acknowledge. Sometimes just sit there, or wow, that that hurts. That's, you know, I have nothing. Like, what do you do when someone's mom dies, or they tell you, oh, my mom died yesterday? Like, it's, oh, okay, let me try and help you figure out the process. No, no, you know. So by Allah saying like, wow, I wish I knew how to teach you better, I just don't have the answer. Like, that's connection, because it's honest. I don't know. And instead of trying to, oh, let me come up with something to fit whatever mold we're trying to fit, you know,
Yeah.
that, I feel like that's the problem. We're all trying to solve, we're all trying to come up with our algorithm, or this is how it's, we're gonna fix homelessness, this is how we're gonna fix this.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer. Look, we just wrote a book, like, to try to talk about these things, but we don't, you know, but that's the healing process. You don't have to know the answer, you just have to express it, like, you know, like Allah was saying.
Yeah. And you're right. It's not a problem. Also, it's an experience. And like
Right.
we go through it differently and we cope with it differently. So yeah, I agree with both of you on that. Okay, so I want to go back to something you wrote, Erica, then. And let me see what the title of this. I make notes and then I forgot what the title is. In your chapter, there's no part of me that desires to be the outlier.
Mm.
And on page 24, you describe the story of Dana. Is that
Yeah.
who says, I don't like attention. Unfortunately, you are the automatic center of attention just because you look so different. And the chapter, which describes, I think it's a Black woman, I believe,
Mhm.
that goes on to say that being the center of attention eventually equates to prolonged stress or pressure.
Mhm.
Do you relate to how Dana felt? And if so, how does that feel to you? And how did you deal with it in your own life narrative?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think in some aspects I really do relate to that. Um, I think just, and it could be, and it could be a lot of different segments, right? It doesn't have to just be being a Black woman. It can be anything in that environment that's not the majority, or that's not the most, right? Recently saw this. My husband and daughter and I went. We were doing some like apple picking, or up in the farms in the hills where I live, and you could tell the environment of people. They were all having to be Caucasian, but you could tell the class level. Like, it was so weird. Like you could, they all physically have the same race, but you could tell the people that looked a little, you know, like the way they dressed, the way they were talking, you can see those differences. And so I think when you have a difference and you just happen to be that difference in whatever planted environment, now all of a sudden you're the center of attention. it just so happens that when you are, I'm just speaking from my own, coloring, we're a lower percentage than the rest of the, the most of the United States, right? For being Black, African American, what have you, it's less. So anywhere you go, most of the time there may be two of you, three of you, maybe at the grocery store, maybe, I mean, depending on where you live, if you're not living in an all Black area or all this. And so for me, I think I relate to it a lot because in my educational levels, as I moved in different areas, different places in my life, like it would just be someone that looked like me or maybe one other person, right? And so with that, it's almost like every time there's a discussion about some topic, it goes to you. Or, oh, we're talking about food today, or we're talking about, crime. What do you think about that, Erica? Like, why do we have to,
Yeah.
why? And so and she may have meant many different things, but the way I related to that was being that center of attention when you don't want to be.
Mm.
When you don't want, like, it's like, why do I need to
Yeah.
answer that question? And it could be a positive, right? For example, something that I had said when I was in I think it might have been in like junior high, and I got corrected quickly on this, but I had said to a friend in class, I was like, well, oh my gosh, you're so smart. I mean, you're Asian, you're so smart. Which in my head, I'm like, I'm giving you a compliment, you're so smart. And she looked at me like, just because I'm Asian doesn't mean I'm smart. Like that's like that's disrespectful. This is in junior high, right? And so I'm thinking like, well, what did I say that was wrong? I don't understand. I just said you're smart, But it's like you're already categorizing things with people, whether they want that, right? Being smart in our society, that's a good thing, right? So me being asked a question or, hey, can you speak on this, Erica? Are you that, like, sometimes those are positive things, but I don't want to all the time.
Yeah.
Like, and why are you asking me? Why can't you ask this person? Why does it have to be me? So there's pressure with that, because now you're like, oh, I don't want to decline this, or I don't want to say no, or now I'm going to be looked at a certain way, or, oh, I better give a happy answer because there's pressure to respond
Right.
and not be honest with your response, if that makes any sense. And now you're like, well, let me not say what I really think. But so there's so many different layers to that. And I think maybe we've all experienced that on some level, but especially when you're someone that, when it comes to like skin color, you stand out. And so I'll automatically, sometimes it's just like, oh, let's default to Dana, or let's default to Alaa. He knows everything about Middle Eastern culture. And it's like, no, I don't. Like, and so that's where the pressure comes from. And you have this pressure of how do I respond? Yeah.
No, yeah, I agree. Being the spokesperson is not always the favorite seat of those marginalized. And as you said, the pressure also to give the right answer that is digestible to people, that is not too honest, not too performative, has some truth to it, but not like a stingy kind of truth.
Right.
Perfect that balance. Like, here's what you should know. Here's why this is not great for us, but at the same time, not make them feel uncomfortable. It is a dance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see why that would be a pressure. I agree. Okay, so still on Dana, Erica, if you can also,
Yeah.
the following page, you also say, as an OT, let me, I write these notes and then I forget that I will forget what I meant. On page 25, you say, as occupational therapists, we are put into situations that we may not have been prepared for in school. Yet these become our day-to-day interactions and how we care for people. And to that is like, what is your message then to educators? Because educators have a big platform to teaching the students about this. What is your message to educators preparing students for all diverse backgrounds to enter the profession. It's like, they have a big power in telling the students what to do.
Yeah.
So what is your message to them?
I don't know how if other programs do this a lot. Maybe they do, but in my program, which sometimes it's a running joke because people will say, "Oh, I hated doing that," while you're in school, but then afterwards you're like, "I am so glad that I had to do that," and it's reflect. So we don't know, and we're not going to know. There's no way to give every single scenario that is going to happen. Some things are so crazy. I think Allah even has one in his chapter about the person who had a gunshot, got shot, and there was a cultural thing that happened. It's like you can't like plan for these specific scenarios. But what you can do is you can work on yourself. And I think with reflecting a lot, and that's what I had to do in my program. Like it was like almost after everything. It wasn't just, okay, let's do this assessment. How did the course go? No, not how did the course go. It was every time you did something patient wise, or if we went out and did something in the community, or if it was missionary or work, or, if you were the first time at some school based and your first time seeing kids with disabilities or whatever the case was, you had to reflect on that. And when you reflect, you want to be honest in your reflection. Even if it's for and for educators, I would say maybe you want to do something that's measurable so they can turn something into you. That's fine. But I would even say have the students do an additional one that they don't turn in, that they don't have to share that. They just do it on their own. So they can say things that may be really raw, or like, that looked really weird, or I felt so uncomfortable with, or, I've never had this encounter with that kind of person, whatever may come off as like, oh my gosh, what, that is so rude, or that is so this. Because, we're in our society, there's a lot of shame.
Yeah.
We do a lot of shame and judgment on ourselves, and then we do a lot of shame and judgment on other people. And so it's a wonder nobody wants to open up, right? And so for educators, I would say to add, even if it's pharmacology class, add reflection in some way. Figure out how you can add what do you think about that population needing more opioids? What does that mean to you? What do you think? Because the more that you can internalize and find out what you think on a matter, the better you have to share with somebody else.
Yeah.
That would be my.
No, yeah, I agree. I'm an educator myself, and I'm glad, like, I'm on the right path because you said reflection, and I have reflection in my courses. So I'm glad this is step one done.
Great.
But yeah, I agree. And that's why it's like, to your point, when we say, I don't like the term safe space because there's no such thing. We are human beings and we judge each other. It is a brave space. It's like, it takes guts to say what's on your mind. And sometimes it doesn't have to be public. Sometimes admit it to yourself and work with it, because this is internal, private work that will make you a better person who show the empathy and understanding for others. If that gets you there, it's fine. We don't have to broadcast everything we have to think about. Sometimes just reflect on it. So I totally agree on that reflection part. Okay, Ala, I'm gonna go back to the chapter
Sure.
you wrote, which is the story of Oshunta, who goes on to completing her doctoral degree, exploring the leadership path for women of color in occupational therapy. And she wanted to explore how their intersectionality impacted that path to leadership. So going back to the concept of intersectionality, her research showed that 4 themes, including that women need access to opportunity, they need mentorship and sponsorship to help them succeed. Being seen is key for leadership, so that visibility, that taking a seat at the table part, and perseverance is a constant struggle for people of color to make it to leadership. You end the chapter with this: we're grateful for you, Shanta, who places the onus on justice. And I thought this is really powerful. How do you think can other people who don't have access to a doctoral path, who don't have access to a mentorship, can also find the connections to justice and advocate for a just and fair opportunities? And what do those with little opportunities, in other words, those who don't have a doctoral degree, or a path to it and do research, what is the least they could do to connect the problem to justice?
Sure. Well, I'll answer it first by saying those of us who do have those privileges need to do more to provide that to more people. Let me just say that as a disclaimer,
Yeah.
because we need to do more to make education more affordable. We need to do more to make healthcare more affordable. We need to make sure people have equal rights across the board and that there's actual equity in how we're doing things. With that being said, I think, you know, going back to the theme of this book is the least you can do is share your story. Because if you don't have the access to a doctoral degree or the mentorship or even the funds to go to OT school or any sort of higher education, sharing your story emphasizes that justice, and that's the evidence in and of itself. If we're going to be evidence-based practice, evidence-based profession, listening to these stories is enough evidence to tell us we need to be doing more to provide more equitable journeys, if you will. The triumphs are great, but like I mentioned in Erica's story, the whole point is hoping we don't have to be this resilient. You know, I wish we didn't have to be this resilient, right? And honestly, those of us that break through on their own, they're going to break through on their own. They have that in them, and I can't expect that to be from everybody. So I think you're asking what we can do to help, or what they can do to help themselves despite the lack of resources or access, is to share your story. But the more responsible answer would be for us to do have that privilege, to give back and do as much as we can to change the playing field.
Yeah, I agree. And like, telling the story is no simple task.
No, it's not.
Sometimes that's the hardest part of all. So yeah, I agree.
And I will add honestly to, existence in and of itself is resistance. And so persevering every day, waking up in the morning despite not having the resources or the availability or just things, whether it's, Gaza or whether it's here in the States, you know what I mean? Like getting up and moving every day and keep going is in and of itself the least you can do. And people are doing it.
Okay, switching gears to Erica's chapter. In your chapter, Amalgamate, you describe Alice, who is an OT, a student of Korean descent, who grew up in dominantly Asian social climate in California. Alice becomes more vocal about bias and brings to light a conflict with a fellow Asian colleague. I love how you ended on page 44 by saying that Alice created something new. Just like the word amalgamate because of her intersectionality, blending things together and emerging with something else. But my question about this chapter is a classic one about unearthing biases and bringing to light difficult conversations. We're not great at having difficult dialogue, empathy. What is your advice on how the rest of us should do that? Like, how do we talk about, difficult things?
Yeah, so it's not an easy one, right? So the only advice I would have is that, again, I'm going back to vulnerability, right? So being okay with feeling embarrassed, rejected, even ignorant. This is why that reflection and self-work is important, because then you can discover what things make you feel extremely uncomfortable, you know? Um, but really feeling that and just knowing like, oh, this is gonna be, that some, or I can say, for example, like when you're a new grad and you're you're about to see your first patient, and you're outside the door and your hands are shaking, or you're gonna hurt this person, am I gonna say the right thing, am I gonna give them the right equipment, that kind of feeling. But it gets better as you keep working. You don't have that feeling 5, 10, 15 years later. It gets better, even though you have so many different experiences. Now okay, at least I have a way of approaching, because you've worked for so long. It's the same thing with this, right? And so I feel like we hold back asking certain questions. why, you know, maybe somebody wears a garment, or maybe even hearing a piece of someone's story and then realizing that it's totally different than what you said about that story, but you're afraid to bring it up to the patient or to a colleague or whoever. And a lot of it's fear. You know, we live in such a fear society. Like I said, that judgment, that shame. Who wants to be looked at as a racist,
Yeah.
or a bigot, or a hater of some kind? Nobody wants to be looked at that way.
Yeah.
You know, and so all that does is make us learn less about one another. And so you have to be okay with the truth. We are human. We are all human. I can tell you, I'm sure I've already shared a story about, you know, saying something in junior high, but I'm sure I've said a lot more worse things, not intentionally, but just my journey and learning through life and going on adulthood, you know? And so that human experience is learning more just to learn that, you know, you learn, you're like, oh, I thought I knew it, but I didn't. And you just keep and going more. And life has many depths of, like our book, stories. And so, you know, there are so many great things that happen. And as you keep going and learning, you realize so many things just happen by accident. And that's how Alice's story evolved. You know, her going through and having these interactions and creating something beautiful by accident. You know, and one of my favorite things is you know, chocolate chip cookies, and that was an accident. Chocolate chip cookies were created by accident. You know, or X-rays, that was an accident. Penicillin, an accident. You know, so like great things happen when there's an accident, or there's I made a mistake, or I made a mess in the lab, which is I think how penicillin was created. You know, not these methodical things, but if you're truly intentional, I believe if your heart is placed and you're really wanting to learn about something with those good intentions, I think most people feel that. I know I do. You know, so because what happens next could be the greatest accident in this new created relationship, and people that you never thought would connect, i.e. C. Martha Stewart and Snoop Dogg, right? Like some of the greatest relationships that come about, would never happen, you know, but you have to be willing to, you know, it's like have these accidental issues.
Yeah. So your advice would be like, you know, be vulnerable, share the story.
Yeah.
Just go with it. You'll never know what
And
happens.
you can start small. You don't have to like pour out your whole life story or say something totally off the cuff that's, you know, is going to offend somebody. But, you know, maybe, should I ask them what that bracelet means on their arm? That's silver. Like, it looks nice, but should I ask them what that means? Ask.
Yeah.
There may be some huge story, huge religious thing, like,
right.
And in my line of work, a lot of these stories lead to my rehab success, because the cultural linkage, it comes back. Oh my gosh, that's why you can't do this function, because of all this other stuff that you told me.
Yeah.
You know, it's the connection that I made.
Yeah.
So
I think if it's coming from a place of empathy and care, that will shine through. And
yes,
you're asking, is gonna land in the right place, hopefully. But
yes.
okay, well, thank you for that advice. All right, Ala, I'm gonna ask you about something also you write. In your I Choose to Love chapter, you talk about the lack of gender diversity in our profession, which is no secret, by highlighting the story of Joseph, an OT from Ghana, who went to Howard University, which is the giant HBCU, and then started OT school. Not surprisingly, a different student makeup, with a different student makeup than Howard. He described his experience at Howard as vibrant and family-like, something that he didn't experience in OT school. Joseph talks about choosing love, and he doesn't, treat evil with evil, referring to bias, which is a beautiful thing. And also, I'm gonna give another shout out to someone who identifies as a Black OT, who's very vocal about these issues, which is Dr. Yuchi. A shout out to you. So Ala, my question to you, as an Arab identifying male as yourself, how is your experience similar or different from Joseph and the other male OTs in the profession?
I think the only similarity Joseph and I can share honestly is that we're male.
Mm,
I can't, and that's really the most, I think, biggest takeaway with writing this book was the humility that it furthered in me,
mm,
right? I talk about how we judge a lot of how people respond. I was guilty of that a lot. Like, why aren't you more angry? Why aren't you doing this? And why are you talking about it this way? And as I've gotten older and listened to more stories and gotten more humble in how I go about things, um, it's really impressive to be continued to be able to always choose love. And you could hear it in him as he was talking about it. It wasn't just like he was just saying it to say it because it sounds nice. I felt it in that interview, right? Um, I again, a white passing male, and even when it comes to our census, right? Like we're filling out white, you know, so the hurdles that I might have had as a minority in the profession as a male doesn't compare. Um, so I just highlighting,
yeah.
that perseverance and the way they go about it is impressive. And Dr. Uchi does the same thing, that their journeys are beautiful. And we need to hear more of these stories. Like, we could do a whole book on just Black male OTs and we'd have a pretty awesome, probably bestseller, because we need to hear stories that we're not hearing, right?
Mhm.
And so I was really proud to write that one. That was a really big moment for me for my growth. And it happened to me throughout the book, right? In a lot of other ways, sort of questioning the response, right? It's like, hey man, this ain't your story, dude. Like,
Mm.
check yourself. Remember, this is their story.
Right.
And so continue to center the person that you're writing about. And it made me a better writer and a better person. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good question. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's your next project then.
Yeah.
Working with someone on telling the stories. Okay, so I want to move on with my last two questions to you. The first one, and I want to start with you, Ala. The book talks about so many great stories, other than the one we just highlighted. Again, we don't have the time to highlight
That's
all.
right.
They're all beautiful. There are like, Black identities, there's Arab identities, there's Jewish identities, and so many other ones. So there's so much to mine in this book. My favorite chapters where you tell your co-author stories. I love these two chapters. So Erica, you tell Alaa a story, and Alaa, you tell Erica's story. I love these two chapters. And
Oh,
um it really brings us down to the power again of knowing one another. When we know each other and tell each, like, I'll tell your story, you tell mine. There's so much power in that, even more powerful than telling your own story. Because, like,
Mhm.
here, I got you. I'll tell your story for you. I think this is one of the most beautiful parts I took out of this book. But again, it comes back to things that you both said, that empathy piece. If I know you well, then I'll care. And if I
Mhm.
care enough, then I'll understand you and I'll get your back and I'll be there to help you and advocate for you. Can you share, a favorite story that spoke to your heart and mind? And again, I'll start with Ala and I'll go back to Erica.
yeah, a favorite story of mine. I don't know that I want to pick one, to be honest. My favorite story might be one that didn't make the book. If I'm
Oh,
being, and of course we can't share their identity. But there was a few that didn't make it, or backed out or whatever, for a plethora of reasons. Um, but I think reading them was like Erica can attest to this. When we got the final like proof of the book before it was printed, I was flying home to Ohio and I read the whole thing like in its entirety. And the collection of the stories together, like I finally like we always talked about how it would feel to read the whole thing in the continuation. And I did that and I told myself this is absolutely amazing, but we're literally scratching the surface. Um, like, and that's like you said, you had to pick three or four to talk about in this interview, because you wanted to kind of have these conversations, but like the book in and of itself is scratching the surface. There's so many identities that that aren't addressed. And so even the feedback from that's one thing I want to highlight. And Erica can attest to this, like the feedback we got from the participants, after they read their own story, right? Because we sent it to them before we sent it, we sent it to the publisher. The feedback that we got from them was, yeah, I can't really describe that. It's like, it's so invaluable. Like it was really everything. Like, we could sell 0 books, but the feedback we got just by hearing someone's gratitude to be able to
Yeah.
share their story, it was like, you're thanking me, like, yeah, thank you, actually, so I didn't answer your question, but that's, yeah.
No, no,
I'm
that's
like a dad that can't pick their favorite kid. I'm not doing that, I'm not doing that.
okay. You're off the hook. Erica, what about you?
I, that was my MO. He just happened to end up going first. Like, if you could see my notes that I wrote, I put like, oh my gosh, wow, there's no way. Like that was
Yeah.
was the noted response that I put under the question, thinking like, oh, I'll go back and figure out a story, and there really isn't. I I can tell you when I read it, because I waited until the book was bound together. I got it, and because I wanted to dive in and read all of them. Try to be disconnected as possible. Of course, we wrote them, we edited them, so I'm trying to create space so then I can try to read it from a fresher mind. And for me, I remember and this is something that one reason why I'm like, man, I want people to get the book. I want them to get it because I want them to experience what I'm feeling when I read it. First, I interviewed, and then when I read it, I had I had all these feelings, right? And one of the things that kept happening is I would read one chapter, like I would read chapter 1, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm reacting kind of like when you're watching a movie, you're mad, and then you're sad, and then you're advocating, and then you're like, well, why'd you do that? And you're like, oh, like all these things.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, that chapter 1, that's the best. I would read chapter 2, and then I'm like, nope, this is it.
Yeah.
Chapter 2, this is it right here. And then I would read chapter 3, like I would every chapter. And the reason is because, some of these people, I'm not male, I'm not Middle Eastern, I'm not this, I'm not that, but I related to every single chapter in some way.
Yeah.
All of them. And that's what was powerful to me, because I didn't grow up I didn't, practice for 45 years and have this huge thing in the East Coast. Like, I don't know what it's like to be Black and practicing in the South. Like, I don't have any of those things, but like, I still related to every single person.
Yeah.
And that was powerful to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And as someone like a reader, like I have nothing to do with the writing of it. It's like, every story that read is like, this is gotta be the best one. And then like I go, this is really good too. I mean, so different stories, all of them spoke to my heart. And as you said, Erica, it's like, although it's like, I don't share the identities of most of these storytellers, I felt something, and I think what brings us together is that, marginalization piece. We feel it, it takes one to feel one, I guess. Okay. So no favorites. Got it. My last question to you is, and before I ask you that question, I really want to, and maybe this is frowned upon, but I do want to acknowledge the publisher of this book.
That's what's up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jessica Kingsley Publishers. And I noticed that, they do prioritize marginalization and stories of diversity and stories of justice. Yeah. And I admire that because it takes that platform and visibility to tell these stories. I mean, you could have told these stories verbally every day, but once you have them in the book, it lives forever. And it becomes and it then becomes accessible and re-accessible. So it does take a place of power and visibility to tell these stories. So I do want to give a shout out to this publisher because, seriously, it gave us like, this book to enjoy and read and tell these stories. Okay, so, on that note, I'm really curious because this can be the end of the line for you too. I really hope not. And I really hope you have an answer for me for this one. What is the next for you two in your OT journey in general? And hopefully a project that you're working on. And what advice would you give to current students and practitioners when it comes to understanding their own occupational identity?
Go ahead, Erica.
What's next for the both of us
Let's
together? Well, I can say we're creators, right? So we're constantly in conversation. I mean, meeting for so long every week on a Tuesday, it doesn't just go away so quickly. You know what I mean? So we still, even if we're not having a meeting, there's a text, there's a call, there's something, some random idea, So we're constantly thinking of, and I think mostly we have maybe too many ideas and we need to narrow it down, honestly. But there's so much more between the two of us, I think, when it comes to creating this, because
Just get started.
they're scratching the surface, like Alaa says, scratching the surface is exactly what we did. Me personally, yeah, I mean, I love people too much, so I'm always dabbling into. And it's sad. I really shouldn't, because I need time for myself. But then I'm like, no, this population needs something. I personally am really big into. I mean, I'm a certified hand therapist. I love the physical nature of the body, but I'm always educating people on how connected the physical is to the mental and the rest of the body. And so my whole journey is constantly getting in spaces and educating many, many different people, different cultures, regarding nutrition, mental health, and how that relates to your physical performance. And so, because we don't ever connect that, not ever, but I'm just going to say, especially in the specialty that I'm in, a lot of times people are like, oh, you just do one thing and you just work on this body part. And it's like, guess what? Your hand is connected to the rest of your body. So we got to work on the rest of your body and your mental health and what you're putting in it in your body. So that's kind of my thing, spirituality, all of that. And so I kind of put those together a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of, that's what I like to do. Future platform would be with more speaking on that, more education, and then definitely more in the community with youth regarding to get them young so that they can kind of progress in that area. So
yeah, that's amazing. Like, I would love to see like a book from you, like, or like a short film or whatever. It says like hand is culture too, because it is.
yes,
The things that we do with our hands and culturally speaking,
yes,
making, like, that would be great. So I'm so glad you highlighted this, the connection between body and culture.
yes.
Ala, what about you?
Yeah, but I'll echo what Erica said. Like we're talking a lot. We're not going to spill any beans, but we're talking a lot. We're doing some things that hopefully come into fruition. Yeah, on a personal level, I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing, as much as I can and as safe as I can. If anyone's interested, in having me and Eric come virtually or in person, they can actually see us in person or virtually, do it soon because we're busy people. But they can go to nobias.net and try and book or schedule something. We're going to promote this book and promote these stories and add more stories, and highlighting more stories. And I don't want to ever, I used to always say I was a voice for the voiceless, right? That was like a cute way of saying things, but I'm not actually. I want to just give them the microphone and speak for themselves and hear their stories and hear their experiences. And I'm going to try and keep doing that, as best that I can. And it's resonating with my child. So it's like, that's even more motivation to like keep going because the questions he's asking me are pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, we gotta go. We gotta keep working. And I'm tired, but I'm going. We're going.
That's amazing.
Say that one again.
Well, thank you so much for being so brave to write this book and give the voice for the voiceless and the voiceful. I mean,
Yeah.
it's important. And again, as Ala said, please check out nobias.com. Please get the book.
.net.
.net. Yeah, .net.
Yeah, .com is more expensive.
Okay, I'll make sure to put that one. Get the book. It's fun to read. It's easy to read. It's so inviting. I enjoyed it. Thank you so much for writing it. I'll definitely be sharing it with people. I want them to see these stories and know more. But again, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm sure we'll talk soon. I look forward to these awesome projects, and you gotta spill the beans at some time.
Yeah, I'll text you
Yeah.
later.
All right. Thank you, Erica. Thank you,
Of
Alaa.
course. Thank you very much.
Yes.